I see it, and I'm hitting live on YouTube. All right. We're up. We are up on YouTube.
Go ahead, Richard.
Oh, it's a committee meeting. Haywood's up.
Go ahead, Haywood.
Okay. Thank everyone this morning for participating. As you can see from our agenda, we've got a lot to talk about. We're trying to save as much time as possible for Nate to walk us through some budget discussions and leave plenty of time for your questions. So if I could use that as a prelude to turning it over to Dean Weber for an internal audit report. Dean,
good morning, Chairman.
On?
I am, sir. Thank you. Good morning, Chairman Cochran, committee members, Chancellor, and guests. I come before you to provide an informational update of activities of the Office of Internal Audit. The COVID-19 pandemic has impacted many aspects regarding the way work is completed and business occurs, and internal audit really is no exception to this. But I'm pleased to report that effects of the pandemic have not significantly impacted audit's ability to continue working in support of this great university. The majority of internal audit work has been conducted remotely through the use of various technology platforms, including Zoom, Microsoft Teams, and secure file sharing networks. Through technology and some creativity, work of the Internal Audit Office continues to provide an expected level of performance. The slide before you shows that that the internal audit work plan shown here kind of lays out a roadmap of identified engagements to be completed as part of the department's work throughout the year. The work plan also establishes budgeted hours to complete special projects and advisory engagements as those needs arise. The chart provides a recap of engagements populating the current year work plan. At the end of the second quarter, as highlighted in green, 54 projects were highlighted as being representative of audit plan engagements. Planned engagements are those deemed important from a risk assessment exercise completed supporting the work plan's development process. The second category of internal audit work, special projects and advisory requests, represents 36% of planned activity at December 31st. These engagements comprise audit of fact-based assessments where outcomes are presented to leadership to support their decision-making. These projects typically focus on investigations of financial, compliance, or operational processes, where internal audit provides a bias-free assessment of facts, information, and circumstances. The final category represents 10% of project activity and comprises our completion of those engagements that were underway at June 30th, 2020, were not yet completed. If you could advance to the next slide, please. Providing insight to work plan activity at December 31st, 18 engagements have been completed. This comprises 4 planned audits, 2 carryover audits, 9 special projects, 2 carryover special projects, and 1 advisory engagement. Separately, 4 planned engagements, 2 special projects, and 1 advisory project were underway when we hit December 31st. 13 planned audits and 1 special project request were not yet initiated. The table here really details productivity for the benchmark timeframe. And I'm happy that really at the midpoint of the work plan year, we're at 64% of defined project work as being concluded or underway. If you can move to the next slide. The Office of Internal Audit tracks all reported findings and management responses detailing corrective action plans in response to audit recommendations. When adequate time has passed, the Office of Internal Audit revisits the auditee to evaluate implementation of those management responses to address identified recommendations. At the end of the second quarter, there were 54 recommendations awaiting audit's verification. The total was comprised of 49 unverified recommendations when we started off the year, plus 17 issued during the year, and we've verified 12 year to date. And while there are 54 recommendations there noted as unverified, leadership is afforded adequate time to implement corrective actions. Therefore, not all responses are currently ready for evaluation, and we keep this as a rolling project and work them as time permits. If you can move to the next slide. The Office of Internal Audit supported advancement of professional development training at both the UNC system and national level during this fiscal year. The state of North Carolina requires university internal audit functions to comply with the international standards for the professional practice of internal auditing. These standards define continuing professional education requirements. With many training opportunities impacted by the pandemic, the Audit Office crafted professional training and made it available to all internal audit colleagues and guests of the University of North Carolina system. Outcomes provided 14 hours of professional development presented in a fully virtual environment, actually, delivered over 3 consecutive Tuesday afternoons in October. A slate of 14 guest speakers, including external audit professionals from industry, Carolina faculty, and even the North Carolina State Auditor, provided instruction on a variety of topics. Most importantly, this training was delivered free of charge to the UNC system personnel, affording quality training without impacting tight operating budgets of internal audit shops across our peer system universities. Additionally, promoting Carolina's audit function, a presentation was made nationally at the September conference of the Association of College and University Auditors. A presentation will also be made at ACUA's virtual conference that's upcoming in March of 2021. If we can move to the next slide. Speaking of ACUA, I wanted to share with the committee a benchmark of how peer institutions have adapted audit work plan activity as a result of the impacts from COVID-19. Carolina participated in a nationwide benchmarking survey of peer institutions on this topic, and outcomes are detailed on this slide. Results identified that 27% have adapted work plans to include new projects addressing shifting risks. 25% delayed completion of lower level engagements. Additionally, 20% actually modified objectives and scopes for existing projects. Others eliminated certain topics, had a temporary redirection of staff to complete non-audit work, and some reported no significant changes. If we can move to the next slide. The peer benchmarking survey highlights risk topics institutions plan to complete or are actually now considering as a result of COVID-19. I wanted to share this with you because on that front, we are somewhat ahead of the curve as Carolina's risk assessment and current year work plan had already addressed or are in the process of addressing 5 of the reported project areas peer institutions are now considering. These engagements currently in our audit plan include CARES Act funding, procurement and vendor management, expense management and cost control, and health and safety. And if you recall, remote learning was previously addressed as part of the university's prior year's internal audit work plan. Benchmarking supports here that Carolina's audit function is actively considering and pursuing important trending risks within higher education. If we can move to the next slide. In conclusion, Carolina's internal audit charter requires me to provide the audit committee with periodic updates to the approved internal audit work plan and staffing level. The goal is to complete all engagements detailed in the fiscal year plan. However, the pandemic has unfortunately impacted certain areas of campus operations more than others. Planned engagements in the areas of foreign influence, dean of students, and some NCAA compliance audits may be delayed or not completed. Both student affairs and athletics are heavily consumed in maintaining operations during the pandemic, with the resulting environment potentially presenting an inopportune time for internal audit activity to occur. Additionally, audit work supporting pandemic relief funding to the university from CARES, FEMA, and state grants is actually much greater than initially anticipated when I was budgeting time. This results from both the extended duration of the pandemic and actually the beneficial secondary funding streams that have been recently approved for the university. Internal Audit chairs a temporary pandemic audit and recovery committee. This committee, supported by university peers, provides technical assistance and coordination in managing current knowledge of compliance mandates and the reporting of pandemic funding. Lastly, on the staffing front, I just want to convey that the Office of Internal Audit staffing remains consistent, and I believe it is currently adequate to address the work plan initiatives that we have outlined in the work plan. The next slide. This concludes my presentation. If there are any questions regarding audit projects related to confidential employee matters, I'd be happy to address those during the closed session. If you have any additional questions regarding the work at the department or the information I shared with you this morning, I'd be happy to address them now. Thank you.
Any questions for Dean?
Mr. Chairman,
not, Dean,
this is David. Mr. Chairman, this is David Bullock. Just Dean, I know you and I have had one conversation offline, but was really impressed and would like maybe if you could just speak briefly to the utilization of new technology in your office to assist with the processes and procedures of payment and receiving payments on campus for projects, including construction projects.
Yes, I'd be happy to. Thank you. That's a good question to speak to. The university has recently implemented some changes to vendor management and establishing a vendor management portal where vendors can actually go in and securely update information, and it's verified actually so that when the university makes vendor payments, it eliminates or significantly actually reduces the chance of making fraudulent vendor payments to the wrong person. Some of you may recall there was a situation where Carolina was impacted through a process like that, where there was an inappropriate change to a vendor payment account. And corrective actions were taken. The university was on top of it right away and placed us in a good position working through internal controls and with Nate and the finance team to get that up and running. So there's been some strong improvements there to really define a better process.
Any
Thank
further
you.
questions for Dean? Dean, thank you for a very comprehensive report. Now, I would ask that David.
Haywood.
Yes.
This is Jeff, Jeff Brown, and it really isn't for Dean, but I may, and we can maybe get further input on this at the March meeting, but either to the chancellor or provost, we have talked about annually as the annual financial audit comes through, that we also receive just a quick overview of what I might call the academic audit, which relates back to some of the academic irregularities and the checklist of things from attendance and other things of that nature. So I don't know whether, Bob, you're available just to briefly report in on that now, or we can do it at a later time. But I think it's good practice for us to receive at least an update of that, as well as at least at the same time as the financial audit, given the importance of ensuring that we're staying on task there.
Yeah, Jeff, I can make a few comments about it in a general way, and then if there is the desire to have a more formal, more or less official audit, then we can do that as well. I've also asked Lisa Broom to join this call in the event that there are some additional questions that the board might have with regards to this issue. You know, as I think everybody is well aware of, there were many changes that were made in between 2013 and 2015 with regards to the oversight of the academic athletics program, and there are currently three committees that I'd just like to point to that are actively engaged in providing that oversight. The first, which is probably most familiar to many of you, is the Faculty Athletics Committee, which reviews and updates all processes that are in place, and these processes were identified out of a committee that previous Provost Jim Dean and Bubba Cunningham put together. And those have been in place for review, constant review and updating by the FAC. That committee is chaired by Darrell Johnson. The second committee that I would just mention is the Executive Committee of Student and Academics. This is a committee that is chaired by myself and with Bubba Cunningham and representatives from the Provost's office as well as from athletics. And this committee is there primarily to address any major issues that might come out of Faculty Athletics Committee or out of other areas related to the academic program. In partnership with Michelle Brown, I receive constant reports from athletics in partnership with the NCAA, looking at individual team performance, relative performance within teams, and also we compare our university's performance team by team and program by program against our ACC peers and beyond. And then the final committee that I would just talk about is the Cluster Review Committee. This is a less formal committee, but it is supported by the Registrar's Office and also from key faculty members from the college, as well as Lisa Broom representing FAC. And they do an audit or a constant review each semester of majors and courses, as well as grades. The majors and courses are reviewed to pick up on issues that came out of the period, Jeff, that you're talking about with regards to academic irregularities and the identification of clustering of athletes either in a major or in a course. In addition, this committee also looks at any irregularities, any trending, towards irregularities with regards to grades within a course or beyond. And so there's a lot going on. I know that there has been some question about how we monitor attendance, and for various reasons, the provost office does not manage attendance within each of the courses. That is left predominantly up to the course instructors. There have been instances, and currently we have a few coaches that are very active in monitoring athlete attendance, and they've used such technologies as Spotter and also less technical approaches as human class checkers who do randomly evaluate whether or not student athletes are attending classes as appropriate. But these things are done somewhat independent of the provost's office, but are regularly being performed. So I just wanted to give everybody a broad overview, Jeff. I hope that helps provide a little bit of insight in terms of the intense work that's being done both by the provost's office as well as by athletics in partnership with the provost's office in making sure that we are staying faithful to the issues that were raised during that athletic irregularity period.
No, thank you very much. That's exactly the kind of check-in that I was seeking. So thanks, Bob. And I want to just make it clear, obviously, this is just an annual question that I think is appropriate for the board. And as we do the audit, it seems like the appropriate time to do that. It has nothing to do with anything of concern, but rather just wanting to check in. So thanks for that update.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, Dean and Bob, thank you very much for your report. And at this time, I'd like to turn it over to David Ruth for a development update.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is honestly really good to see everybody. I miss seeing our good friends, so it's great to see you all on the screen. TJ, if you'll pull up the presentation. We've been talking about development results over the last several meetings. You've been tracking this. I've been tracking it and worrying about it. And I want to walk you through what happened in December, walk you through what happened at the end of the calendar year. And it's positive news. And I wasn't fully prepared for positive news at that level. I'm always optimistic. I'm hopelessly optimistic, but we actually had a very nice calendar year end. If you go back to, though, when the world turned upside down, I think the entire world, particularly our development team, had to pivot to a different way of doing business. We didn't have the luxury of donors coming to campus, which is a major handicap. We didn't have the ability to travel to see them. So everything had to shift, as our entire worlds have, online. And we had to learn how to do the business again. And what you didn't know at the moment, you knew you were working really, really hard. You didn't know if you were doing all the right things, some of the right things. And over the course of those first 10 months or so, as we shared with all of you, development results were trending under the previous year's numbers, 22, 23, 24% in total commitments. And that was about the same that we had, that we were hearing from UCLA and Berkeley and Ohio State and Virginia and our close peers in the public space. So TJ, let's begin to tell this story. Next slide. First number that we're very focused on, we have 702 days left in this campaign. And actually we talk about this. That's about 500 business days. We can't afford to lose a single one. And there's urgency as we head toward 12/31/22, which is the stated end of the campaign. So next slide, TJ. So let's take a look at, we began to unpack December, and typically the very first number I get is an indication of what 12/31 looked like online. And the whole world shifted to more online kinds of activity and buying and all kinds of transactions. But the picture on 12/31 actually was encouraging. And it felt like December was busy. I knew, though, we didn't have a $25 million gift in those December numbers or anything larger, not anything over $10 million. So I knew kind of what the larger gift traffic looked like. But 12/31 looked very positive. And I don't know if you folks have a sense for the scale of some of what we processed, but we processed almost 1,700 gifts on a single day, 20% more than the previous year, and the dollars were 35% higher. Next slide, TJ. So the next thing we can do once we've got 12/31 in the books is look at the whole of December. We processed 7,000 transactions online in December, and those dollars were up 38%, a little over $4 million. If you will, this is kind of our regular retail gift traffic, and it was looking encouraging. By the way, we survey users of that site after they've made their gift. It's a very simple survey. Happiness with the way the site worked and the efficiency and ease of use is about 9 out of 10, which is about as good as I could hope for. Next slide. One of the things we did know is that we had received some really special gifts, nice gifts. We had 3 different 6-figure gifts to the Chancellor Science Scholars Program in December. That was particularly important. This $1.4 million, particularly important because we have an outstanding match from the Keenan Trust that we needed to raise money against in order to get that money from the Keenan Trust. So very nice activity with the Chancellor Science Scholars. And the most important thing that does is allow students like Jasmine Okoto from Zebulon to have a spectacular experience beginning to dive deeply into the STEM fields that she has chosen, and to get a research experience that sets her up for future careers. Next slide. Another really encouraging gift, and I've got Kel's picture up here because I think most of you do know that we lost our dear friend Kel in late December. Kel was a very close friend to so many of us, certainly a very close friend to me, and it was a really sad moment. It was a little poetic, but roughly the same week Kel left us, we received a gift that Kel has kind of been in the middle of. Kel led for us a group of private equity, venture capital, private investment Carolina experts that came around the table and said, how can we be more effective in this space? How can you, as our key volunteers, make sure we're ready to handle gifts in this space? And we had a very sophisticated advisor in the Triangle who reached out to us in early December, said, I think I have a client who wants to talk about something that probably won't happen till the spring. Got a call back about the 10th of December and said, my client would really like to talk about making this happen in December. Can you do it? And folks, I want you to be comfortable and confident between Micah Maloof, Beth McKeithen on our gift planning staff, and a lot of team around them. They knew exactly what needed to happen to get this private company C Corp stock over the transom by 12/31, accomplish the donors' objectives, make advisors very happy. And this is a really, really significant gift. We have very, very conservatively valued at $5 million. That will pay for future undergraduate and graduate level science education. Once this monetizes, and we know the company well, I think we're going to be talking about the impact of this gift. So that was another nice thing that happened in December. Next slide. I was particularly excited, and we've been working on this gift for the fall. But we got final paperwork signed on a new $6.1 million gift to the UNC Program for Public Discourse to really pay for a first-class speaker series where we can put on display the ability for two really smart, accomplished people to debate a subject and show our students and our community what civil discourse looks like, what reasoned discourse looks like. It's a very powerful gift from Doug and Nancy Abbey. Nancy is our alum, Nancy and Doug Abbey. Very powerful gift. It adds to $1.9 million they already had here. It's an $8 million shot in the arm to the UNC Program for Public Discourse, which was wonderful. But again, $6 million. That was our largest gift in December. Next slide. And a fun gift. Many of you know Susan Gravely, who founded Vietri. Susan spent her entire career running a business in Italy, manufacturing in Italy, loves international and global things. Her husband, Bill Ross, created a very nice Christmas gift for Susan with a $500,000 study abroad scholarship. That is a very powerful gift. So again, a nice signature gift in December. Next slide. So this is something I've asked our development team to really sit on and feel proud of and to be proud to have been a part of, but having been behind 22, 23, 24% for the entire fall, this December, as of January 11th, when we pulled the numbers to put them in your packet, was actually caught up against last year and 5% ahead. Those numbers change depending on the week you pull them, but $92 million went in since the 1st of December to add to that number, particularly encouraging. Next slide. Cash continues to run a little bit behind last year as of that date. A little further into January, cash had completely caught up as well. Next slide. Now, where that puts us as of the 11th of January, when we pulled all these numbers, we're at just shy of $3.6 billion in the campaign. That number is now over 3.65 as January's continued to look good. If you think about that months ahead number, when COVID happened, we fell down a little bit to about low 8s, 8.2, and now the months ahead numbers recovered. Chancellor does a great job of talking about where we are in this campaign, but talks about being at 85% of goal and only 75% of time elapsed. Hussman School of Journalism has now reached their campaign goal, and we have one more knocking on the door. CPA is very close, so the unit numbers are very encouraging too. Next slide. Good progress on the signature initiatives. I won't go into detail on those. Next slide, TJ. Here's what I think the key slide is actually. The squiggly line is our monthly proposal tracking. And as you see in March and April, when the world went upside down, it was hard to figure out how to react and adjust and get proposals to people when you couldn't see them. That was the time of the pivot. The blue bars are the current fiscal year comparisons. And one of the things we preach within our team is it's nice to have an engagement strategy, but until we present a proposal, we don't really have an ask on the table. So we continue to focus a lot with our team about delivering proposals, because at a minimum, we get feedback about what the donor's thinking. But look at the blue bars in the fall. September above the previous year, and that's pre-COVID time. October a little bit below, November above, December above. That, I believe, is really what was pushing the year-end numbers. And you know what, folks? We had a good stock market in December, but we had a good stock market in the fall. We had a charitable gift deduction opportunity in December, but I heard a little bit about that. And I heard actually one or two donors think about pulling a pledge forward and decided they actually didn't think it was going to expire and continued to think the same way they'd been thinking. But I'm as proud of this slide as I am of anything we're showing you today. Next slide. I think that's it. So thank you. Haywood, I'll be happy to take any questions if I can.
David, if I could just jump, Haywood, this is Kevin. If I could just jump in, I just want to thank David and his team for an incredible sort of first half of the year. These are really impressive numbers. And I think it speaks to the fact that we've stayed true to the campaign priorities that were established very early in the campaign. They align really nicely with Carolina Next Innovations for Public Good, our strategic plan that we're coming up on the 1-year anniversary of when this board endorsed that plan. And when I'm out talking to donors and alumni, and most often now, as we know, that's over Zoom, but I have enjoyed having some smaller, very small, one-on-one, one-on-two sort of gatherings at Quail Hill with some of our donors. We've talked about that alignment of the priorities of the campaign with that of Carolina Next. And so I think that's why we saw the best December that we probably have ever had. And as David has said, it's looking like January may be one of the best that we've ever had. I loved getting on the phone with Nancy and Doug Abbey about 3 weeks ago and talking about that incredible gift, over $6 million for that program in public discourse, which it's a uniquely Carolina program that we're going to be proud of. We are proud of it. It'll just allow it to grow in a really special way. So David, thank you.
Thank you. And I just make one more comment. You really need to put December and January together to get a true picture of the year end. But we still have days left in January, and the combination of the two is the best calendar year end we've had since Brett Usherman made the $100 million gift in 2015. So encouraging. I want to be clear. I'm not predicting we're going to stay on an exceeding path, but I'm just encouraged that the business didn't continue to decline, didn't continue to stay 20 or 25% behind, but the donor really responded. And I will say this, we have a chancellor who really enjoys development, is good at development, spends time on development. And this work takes a village from everybody who touches something all the way to Kevin. So,
any other questions or comments?
Haywood, this is David. Just want to thank Kevin and David for all their hard work. Thanks.
Thanks,
I know
David.
you guys are working really hard, and the pivot has been impressive.
Any other questions or comments? If not, David, thank you for a great report, as always. Now, at this point, let's turn it over to Nate, who's going to walk us through the semi-annual lease report. And Nate, I believe you found a way to, excuse my raspy voice, I think you found a way to summarize the lease report and the capital report so we can maybe get back on track for the budget discussions.
Thank you, Chair Cochran. I will be brief on both of those reports. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you. The next two items are semi-annual reports for real estate operations and capital, respectively. Both reports are in your board materials. I won't go into detail on each, but we'll highlight a couple of points. First, on real estate operations, you'll see university lease space is forecast to decrease in 2021 after years of steady increases. We've targeted this area as an opportunity for cost savings and are working to maximize existing square footage and move away from centrally funding lease space. Switching to the capital report, you'll note the volume of activity, particularly projects in design, has declined. And this reflects the impacts from the pandemic and the number of projects put on hold. With that, I'd be happy to address any questions on either informational report.
Any questions for Nate? Nate? If not, let's start the budget report, and I'll leave plenty of time for questions from the trustees and members of the committee.
Great. I believe we have a slide deck to walk through. Thank you. So we've been hard at work on the budget situation at Carolina. You're likely aware of the recent budget directions distributed across campus. Today, I'll discuss that more and provide an update on our overall budget efforts to date. Next slide, please. As discussed over the past several months, UNC-Chapel Hill faces three major financial challenges. First, we have a structural shortfall, really a mismatch of recurring revenue and expenses that has evolved over several years. It's estimated to total $100 million in this current fiscal year. Secondly, COVID-19 has impacted numerous revenue streams, primarily located in our income-producing units. Major areas impacted include housing, dining, parking, patient care, and athletics. Collectively, revenue losses could be as much as $200 million this fiscal year. And lastly, we have an estimated $850 million in deferred maintenance need. The state is facing a significant backlog statewide, and our funding needs greatly exceed the amount allocated to Carolina each year. These last two areas of financial challenge are being addressed. Since the onset of the pandemic, we've worked with leadership of our income-producing units to implement management plans on the operational and financial impacts from COVID-19. On deferred maintenance, we are working on a variety of options to provide a more reliable and dedicated source of funding to address this longstanding challenge. Today, we'll be primarily focused on our efforts to address the first area discussed, the structural deficit. Next slide, please. So how did we get to this position? It's important to note this has evolved over multiple years. Two major factors are highlighted on this slide. First, a primary driver was our commitment to excellence and level of investments. This included expenditures on new buildings, programs, curricula, legal fees, and recruitment and retentions. While not all of this expenditure was recurring, it contributed to our current situation, with projected expenses being significantly higher than revenue levels. It should be noted, fears regarding the state possibly taking reserves also contributed to this level of spending. So this spending was combined with a lack of a working budget and a broken financial management model on campus. We lacked discipline, a budget process, and appropriate visibility into finances. Next slide, please. So with that context, thinking about our overall budget efforts, this timeline really tries to provide an additional visual on that budget timeline at Carolina and the evolution over the past 2+ years. I think it really shows the tremendous amount of budget work and change in a relatively short period of time. We didn't have an all funds budget before 2019. In 2019, we implemented a common format that allowed a much better financial understanding and visibility. It also provided a foundation to be better prepared to make resource adjustments as COVID-19 impacted the campus in spring 2020. As you know, we instituted mitigation measures early, and that helped us gain additional time to assess and avoid more draconian actions at other institutions. As we entered the fall, we restarted our budget process. I'll expand on this more in the next slide, but the process reflected our commitment to engagement and transparency. Before I do move on, I would like to acknowledge the important role this body served throughout this process. The board has been an advocate for the budget process, financial transparency, and financial management. That engagement and support has certainly helped us make the progress we've made so far. Next slide, please. So more on our current position. From September through November time period, we met with over 30 campus units to discuss Carolina's budget situation and re-examine each unit's budget. These meetings helped refine our understanding of the challenge and informed our approach to address the budget deficit. In December, we then met again with all campus units to discuss a range of personnel and operating reduction options for fiscal year 21 and fiscal year 22. Options considered ranged from 0 to 2.5% reductions to certain personnel funds and 0 to 10% reductions to certain operating funds in fiscal year 21 and 22. After gathering additional feedback, we issued a memo in early January directing a 1.5% reduction to certain personnel funds and a 7.5% reduction to certain operating funds in fiscal year 21 and 22. We believe this approach best balanced our need to get the budget balanced in a timely manner while also recognizing implementation challenges. Units are currently working on plans to meet these targets. Central Finance and HR are committed to help and have been consulting with units on options and plans. Next slide, please. So how are units expected to meet these targets? The budget guidance included 8 major principles, which are included on this slide. We've also emphasized these during our discussion with units. Prioritize our core mission. We've consistently noted this principle as part of our budget discussions and process. Reduce budgets strategically. You've heard the Chancellor repeatedly refer to vertical strategic reductions. We're asking units to evaluate program enrollment, performance, and alignment. Streamline and eliminate redundancies. We're asking units to think about organizational silos and opportunities. Short-term actions must be complemented with longer-term actions. Consider revenue generation when evaluating opportunities for savings. Another principle, we're all in this together, and shifting impacts to other units runs counter to this principle. Consultation and communication is extremely important. And lastly, we're asking units to consider all layers of personnel with a focus on senior administrators. Next slide, please. So what do we expect as an outcome from this collective action? Well, first and foremost, we will balance our budget by fiscal year 22. We'll also be better prepared for uncertainty associated with the pandemic, as well as state and national economies. And finally, these actions will help us get to a better financial position more quickly, allowing us to strategically reinvest in our top priorities. That concludes my comments. I'd be happy to take any additional questions.
I have a question or comment, Nate, if that's okay. This is Chuck.
Yes.
I just want to applaud you for doing this and being part of this, and Kevin for supporting this, and Richard and the board. You know, been doing this a long time now, and we haven't had this kind of transparency. And the article in the Well that explains this, and the way we've gone to the media and been transparent about the problem and the time to fix it, and the pushback from some people saying, well, this is the time to run up more debt, not and take care of people. This is the exact thing we need to be doing, which is being open and honest with everybody about where we are. And I want to applaud you and the chancellor and everybody involved for making this happen, because I think it's vital for people to understand, and it's something we haven't had, and I think it's great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Other questions or comments?
I have one, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir, John.
Nate, I know you referenced that this structural deficit accrued over a number of years. What sort of time frame is that? 5 years, 6 years, 10 years? How far back?
It's a good question. It's 5 to 10 years, and really a big portion can be traced back to some of the pressure on our F&A funding source in about 5 to 6 years ago. There was some concern the state was looking at those reserves and may take those. And so if you look at a graph over time, you'll see a spend down very rapidly of that fund source, which was a big component of this. But I would say over the last 5 to 10 years, it's really evolved.
And during that time period, who did the Vice Chancellor of Finance report to?
During the more recent time period, Vice Chancellor of Finance reported to the Provost until I believe it was last year or earlier.
My recollection is that change was made last year, so that for almost the entirety minus 1 year of this, the Vice Chancellor of Finance reported to the Provost. Is that correct?
John, let me jump in here. For previously, that position reported to the Chancellor. At some point, probably about halfway through Chancellor Folt's term, it was shifted to the Provost. And then when I restructured about a year and a half ago, as Nate said, I pulled it, we changed it to reporting to the Chancellor.
And who within the administration, Kevin, it sort of chairs and sets the various budgets for the university?
Well, I think as Nate said, part of the challenge here is that we have been working for many years off of I think a broken model. We didn't really have a budget model. And I think that's what, as you know, we worked with Huron for, gosh, probably 2 years, if not longer, to try to look at this RCM model. And then we recognized that probably was not going to work as a totally decentralized budgeting model. And so what we've been working on over the last 18 months is developing sort of a hybrid model, a uniquely Carolina model that would be somewhat of a sort of that RCM model, but we have to be sure that we can support those units that don't generate a lot of F&A or that can't stand alone in a totally decentralized model. So that's what we've been working toward, and Nate and his team have done an incredible job. Jonathan Pruitt started this work during his term as Vice Chancellor for Finance and Operations. So I think we're in a much better place today, but historically we were just working off of there was very little opportunity to forecast, and what Nate and his team have now done is they've created a dashboard where every unit on any given day, including the central finance team, can look in to see what is in certain accounts within each unit. So we're just in a much better place today than we've ever been, so better days are ahead, I promise you. And we've not had a one last thing, John. We really have not had a balanced budget, as best as we can tell, as we go back and look, in about 9 years.
And I share Trustee Duckett's praise for the work that you're doing and the work that Nate is doing to remedy this. I think it's great that you all are addressing it. And one thing that I just recently learned is I didn't know that you had brought in the help of Erskine Bowles to also look at this. And I'm just curious what prompted that. I think it's a good thing. And he said some very sobering things about the nature of this. And I'm just curious, it might be helpful for the board, because I didn't know about it until we heard it through the search committee related to the Vice Chancellor of Finance position.
Sure. I mean, Erskine as you know, loves Carolina. I have confided in Erskine on many occasions over the past year and a half, 2 years in this role. And this is one that he certainly brings a lot of experience and expertise to the table on. And so, we engaged him in helping us to think about how to balance the budget. He has some experience from doing that at the federal level back many years ago, as you know. And I know was a major part of trying to, help us when he was president of the system to think about how to be sure we're all being fiscally responsible. And the Bain report was part of that back in 2009, 2010. And we've even gone back and have looked at that. And so Erskine has been a big help, along with some others that we've pulled in to help. Some of you on this board have helped us. I know that there are some of you helping with our athletics situation. That's one of the areas the COVID-related deficits are predominantly in our auxiliary units right now. And those of you that have that sort of financial business acumen have come in and helped Bubba to tell you, I've heard what some other universities are dealing with their athletics deficit, and it is much bigger than the one that we have. And I think that's in large part because we brought people to the table that have that experience and can help us to solve these problems.
Well, I'm going to be quiet here in just a second. I just wanted the board to know that one of the things, and I took some notes when Erskine was addressing the search committee. I think he said, and this was, and I see Emily on the call, and Emily, I believe that was on the 12th that we had Erskine speak to us. He said that he had been engaged for 3 months on this project, and his exact words were, "I was shocked in my lifetime of public and private sector work, with the exception of Elizabeth City State University. I've never seen a worse mess than what you and Nate have been trying to unscramble here." So I just wanted to make the point that this isn't just one of these things that we hear about of, oh, there's a problem. Don't worry, trustees, the problem's being addressed, which we've, heard a lot of that, or at least I have over the past year and a half, that this is truly a big, serious problem with lots of consequences. And it's not just another sort of little blip. And I'm very appreciative of the work that you and Nate are doing, but I think that there are some consequences on the culpability that are going to have to get addressed at this at some point. Thank you.
John, I'm confident that we have gotten to a great place on this. With the plan that we are currently working under, with all the units working on their individual plans, that we will balance this budget within the next 18 months, as Nate has laid out through the reductions that we've put in place, and such that we'll have not only a balanced budget, but we'll have an opportunity to reinvest in our strategic plan, as any great university should. So I'm very optimistic that we have the right plan in place to get to the finish line on this.
Any other questions? Comments?
Mr. Cochran? This is Trustee Hopkins.
Yes, Kelly.
Thank you. I'm not on the committee to make a comment. I just want to respond to Trustee Pryor's comments and to acknowledge that this has been ongoing. And I want to just say and emphasize that just highlights the work that Nate and the Chancellor have been working on. They have done a phenomenal job. And I'd also like to point back to the people that have done the work prior to this, to help unearth this ongoing challenge that has, come over the years in many different directions, based on government shifts, life shifts. And so I really just want to bring it back to the present moment and commend the Chancellor and Nate for your work and the perpetuation.
Kelly, I think you went on mute right there at the end. Sorry.
I just want to say, I really just want to commend your work. And this was something that was started many years ago, and an ongoing challenge. I know for years, Board of Governors members have been asking questions, and I think the provost was involved in really taking this to the next level of unearthing this. And so getting us to this point. So thank you for carrying it forward, for your transparency, and for taking us into a better day. So thank you very much.
I'd like to add just one thing real quick, and Kelly mentioned it, but from my vantage point of where I've sat, I think it's true. But the first person on the leadership team prior to Kevin who actually identified this structural budget issue and elevated it and forced focus on it was our provost. And there were many, many nights we sat in his office on Wednesday nights from 6 to 9 p.m. dealing with all kinds of important things. But I want to thank Bob for his leadership there too. So, and then Kevin has had the courage to tackle it, and at the chancellor level, and that's been critically important. So.
Thanks, Dave, for saying that. I would echo that, because it was Bob Lewin that recognized that we were not going to be able to fully implement an RCM model, that there were many units on our campus that would struggle under such a model. And he was out there listening to those concerns. And I think that it's this blended model that we have landed on that will, get us, to the right place. So thanks, David, for bringing that up.
Haywood?
Yes.
Richard here. Thank you. I just want to echo comments like Chuck Duckett's and Kelly Hopkins, and congratulating and really thanking you, Chancellor, and you, Nate, and your team for where we are. We've come a long way in a relatively short period of time. I hope we will concentrate on that rather than spending time being critical of former chancellors and former provosts who aren't here anymore. I don't know all the decisions that made before my time on the board, but they made them at the time based on the best information they had, I'm sure. But let's look forward to where we're going and celebrate what's been happening now, which I think is terrific.
Thank you, Richard. Any other questions or comments while we're all together?
Eric Cochran, Ralph Meekins, if I might, just a quick comment. One thing I've noticed and I very much appreciate is that by how you're doing this, you make some very difficult decisions and you're not taking the easy route. For instance, it would have been very easy to make a across the board cut You don't have winners and losers when you do it that way. But I think by not doing it that way, you've made a very bold, brave decision, because across the board cuts typically aren't the best for any program or any university or any business, because it hurts programs that are successful in helping the university. And I just want to thank you for that, because again, across the board cuts are easy. It's like splitting the baby, but I appreciate that.
Haywood, it's Monroe. I just, again, thank Nate and Kevin and Bob for putting this together. A plan's a plan, though, and the execution of the plan is what is the tough part. And, I would hope that as we begin to execute the plan that Nate can give us updates on how the process is going to eliminate that budget, structural budget deficit, which is just one of the three prongs that we got to address.
Thank you for raising that, Trustee Kobe. I think that's an important point. I envision being able to come back and keep this body apprised of the actions taken at the university. To date, we've had very productive discussions with units. They've really centered on clarifying numbers, and they're focused on options and trade-offs. You're likely to see a reliance on vacancies and other savings to meet the immediate numbers in fiscal year 21, with more strategic changes coming in fiscal year 22, where we've got a little bit more time to engage and implement thoughtfully. But we envision coming back to this body and keeping apprised through the process.
Thank you.
Nate, thank you. Any other questions or comments? If not, is there any additional business to come before this committee? And Nate, I got to thank you for getting us back on track on time. So with that being said, if there's no further business, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Chairman, this is Trustee Davis. I make a motion to adjourn.
Kobe seconds.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Haywood, need to do a roll call. Haywood, need to do a roll call.
Okay. Teresa, you want to walk us through that?
I assume this is a roll call, though, just of the committee, correct?
Yes.
And I don't have your actual... Okay, I think I know who are on your... Okay. Mr. Bullock.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Kobe.
Yes.
Mr. Cochran.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Duckett.
Yes.
Mr. McCullen.
Yes.
Mr. Meekin. If I hesitate, I'm not sure if you're on the committee, so I apologize if I call somebody and you're not. Mr. Meekin.
You're doing a great job.
Okay. Mr. Pryor.
Yes.
Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
The affirmatives have it, and with that, I will adjourn this meeting and move over to University Affairs.
Okay, thank you, Haywood. I'd like to convene the University Affairs Committee for January 2021. Hard to believe it's 2021, but I'm glad 2020 is gone. We have a number of reports today, and then we have a couple of items to go through in closed session afterwards. So I'll call it to order and begin the meeting quickly by asking Dr. Amy Johnson, the new Vice Chancellor of Student Affairs, to give us a Student Affairs update. Did you hear me, Amy?
Yes, can you hear me now? I was having a difficult time unmuting. My apologies. Thank you, everybody. Glad to be with you this morning and to be a part of the conversation. The last time I think I had an opportunity to speak with the Board of Trustees, I had not quite reached my 2-month mark in my new role at Carolina. And now that I'm coming up on my 6-month anniversary, thanks to the sort of dog years nature of the pandemic, I think I'm practically old guard at this point. So pleased to be able to share with you a little bit about the activity that we're engaging in our Student Affairs Division. And I want to, in the 5 to 10 minutes that we have this morning, briefly touch upon 3 key themes of building community, supporting our diverse populations and student mental health, and what I'm calling advancing the Tar Heel life cycle, in which I'll highlight some of our key programs over the last 6 months, as well as current initiatives. So TJ, if you don't mind throwing up the PowerPoint. Fantastic. To start us off under the heading of building community, let's move to the next slide and shine a quick spotlight on Carolina housing. In fall 2020, after we changed to remote course delivery, our main campus occupancy, which doesn't include Beatty Hill or Granville Towers, landed at slightly more than 1,000 residents, or about 13% occupancy, down from approximately 8,000 residents in fall 2019, or nearly 97%. In spring 2021, we're increasing our occupancy percentage slightly from the fall to about 31% of capacity with 2,500 residents. While October is typically a time of year when we begin the housing application process for the next academic year, we intentionally delayed our process to allow us to get a better sense of the course of the pandemic in the spring and what would be realistic for academic year 21-22. So we just opened our application process for returning students a couple of weeks ago. This year, Carolina Housing is focusing on outreach to rising sophomores as a part of our new, you'll see there, Relive Carolina program to give our new undergraduates who have not had a typical first-year Carolina experience another chance to live on campus and reap the benefits of retention and academic success and satisfaction that we know from research are tied to living on campus. Typically, about 60% of our beds are filled with returning students, and of those, about 70% are sophomores. So this program is designed to recruit a critical component of our returner population. One key aspect of Relive Campus is our Discover More program, which we're reimagining and customizing specifically as a housing experience for this year's rising sophomore class, which highlights programming designed to educate students about the breadth of our academic majors, to foster student wellness, and to avoid the well-known sophomore slump. These students will also benefit from more senior level RAs who can provide effective peer-to-peer mentoring for our returning students. We're designating Morrison Residence Hall as a class of 2024, that's sophomores only building, and dedicating a large number of our spaces in Ram Village Apartments to rising sophomores, all to help create a sense of cohort and to recover some facet of that initial on-campus housing experience that so many of our first-year students didn't have. We have active social media campaigns, contests, and games to help promote this program, as well as resources to help students find roommates, which is particularly helpful for those who spent most of their first year studying remotely and didn't have a significant opportunity to build friendships with other students in person. Continuing on with our engagements theme on the next slide, one of our primary concerns with a largely remote educational experience was the lack of social connection and community building that students normally have an opportunity to engage in through a residentially based college year. So we have worked hard throughout the fall semester to design and facilitate extensive virtual programming through the Carolina Union, Campus Rec, Carolina Housing, and new student and family programs. Overall, we hosted more than 1,100 virtual student events last semester, which is consistent with fall semester programming in a non-pandemic year. As examples, our student life and leadership team turned our annual Fall Fest into what they dubbed Small Fest, transitioning a huge student event that normally takes place in Finley Fields to a virtual platform where first year students could learn all about our more than 800 recognized student clubs and organizations, and we've reprised that program this month. Also, our new student and family programs unit is just wrapping up our second virtual week of welcome with more than 100 online events to greet incoming students and to introduce them into the Tar Heel family. Student engagement will become even more complex this term with a broader mix of students both on campus or in the local area and spread out at various locations around the globe. Due to the slightly larger population on campus and our new rules allowing small gatherings on campus, we're working hard to create safe, small group engagement opportunities for those students who want them. In tandem with our ongoing virtual programming, which will continue, departments like Carolina Housing and Campus Rec are hosting safe in-person activities like resident and neighborhood small group meetings, a challenge course for individuals and small groups, one of my favorites, which is small group fire pits with s'mores, and a climbing wall and outdoor expeditions. Our Healthy Heals team is also developing social media campaigns about how to stay connected, how to socialize safely this semester. All of these programs are easily viewable in one place on our heallife.com website, which last fall had more than 600,000 page views. Moving to the next slide, one of the new additions to our student affairs resources about which we're particularly proud is our multicultural health program, which knits together two critical areas of focus for us: supporting students' mental health and also fostering an equitable, inclusive, and welcoming environment for all students. The Multicultural Health Program centers the needs of Black, Indigenous, and students of color at UNC. We have 6 MCHP, for Multicultural Health Program providers, who serve these communities through individual therapy, group therapy, and also by creating a network of partners with departments and organizations all over campus. The program has implemented therapy groups to provide a supportive space for students to gather and for us to value, nurture, respect, and celebrate students in our communities of color and who are on the LGBTQIA+ spectrum at Carolina. Although the Multicultural Health Program has only existed for a handful of months at this point, we have connected more than 235 students through 15 outreach events since launching in the fall. And we're already seeing an uptick across utilization of services of students by race when we compare fall 2020 to fall 2019. So we're feeling extremely positive about the demonstrated value of this program in support of our students. And we look forward to continuing it through a proposed very modest student health fee increase next year that has received broad-based student endorsement. On the next slide, we want to conclude today by addressing the Tar Heel life cycle, how we support students in terms of their engagement and success during their time at Carolina, and how we help them launch into the next phase of their lives following graduation, with the ultimate goal, of course, that they stay in contact with us and help us pave the way for the next generation of Tar Heels. With this goal in mind, our career services team provides advisors and resources for all students, both graduate and undergraduate, to help them frame their path after graduation, whether that be planning for graduate school and a long-term career path or an immediate job offer as they complete their degree. We offer extensive career development and planning support, ranging from helping students identify basic occupational interests to resume design to successful interview skills. Our online portal, which is called Handshake, includes wide-ranging job and internships postings, as well as details about recruiting and career fairs, workshops, and employer contact information for students. The average starting salary for our graduates in 2020 was about $56,000, which is just above last year's salary of $55,000. And in the current environment, we take that as a real win. And of course, for the first time, we have implemented all virtual career fairs for spring and fall 2020 and for spring 2021 with positive reviews from students and employers. We've engaged more than 480 employers in our events in 2020, slightly more than 20% over our 2019 total. In the middle of switching over all of our platforms to a virtual environment, Career Service has created groundbreaking diversity, equity, and inclusion scorecard for employers, which just received an award from the National Association of Colleges and Employers and is now a permanent resource on that organization's website. Also, to be more responsive to the hot and in-demand jobs for both graduates and our undergraduates and our graduate and professional career fairs, this year we will organize our events around a new approach, which is designed to sort of focus on themed and niche job function clusters that our analytics show is something that employers are seeking most. This appears to be both responsive in terms of a nationally emerging best practice and will also be helpful to the interests of our students and our employers. So we look forward to seeing the results of that model and we'll keep in touch with you about it. On our final real slide, I just want to take 30 seconds to both sing the praises of some of our student affairs team members and to highlight the fact that our staff aren't just doing great work on campus for our students, but they're making a difference in our communities and fostering the strong town and gown partnerships that are a hallmark of successful universities and a critical part of our mission here at Carolina. From our Dean of Students team, you'll see there Donna Jones was recently elected as the new president of the Chapel Hill Carborough NAACP and was also a nominee this year for the Governor's Award for Excellence within an extremely competitive pool, as I understand it. Aaron Bockenheimer of Off-Campus Student Life was honored with the Chamber's Town and Gown Award, in which he was recognized for demonstrating a notable commitment to civic affairs and leadership, cultivating relationships among our university community members and the business community, neighbors, and our local officials. And then lastly, from the LGBTQ Center, Terry Phoenix spoke to the Chapel Hill Town Council recently in advance of their vote to pass the LGBTQ non-discrimination ordinance, in which Terry shared current data and research findings that demonstrate the impact of discrimination against LGBTQ individuals as it relates to public accommodation. So we're really proud of these team members and grateful that their contributions to our communities are recognized and valued. And on that high note, I want to thank you again for allowing a few minutes to share the recent work and our current plans of our student affairs team. And I'm glad to answer any questions folks may have.
Thank you, Amy. I'll open up for questions and then I have a couple of comments if that's okay. Any questions from anyone? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry. I know I'm not on the committee. If I could have permission to ask.
Sure.
Vice Chancellor Johnson, thank you for that thorough presentation. Wanted to ask because prior to your arrival, there was a tremendous amount of information presented to this board and discussed in the university community about specific efforts to address mental health. And I have personal experience because I have two college kids currently right now, one at Chapel Hill and another one in school in New York. And so I've sort of lived as a parent through the COVID experience of college. And so I'd like to ask if you could address some of the specific efforts that you and your team are implementing on UNC's campus to assist our undergraduate and graduate students, and maybe even our people, those students, and how we're addressing the mental health aspects and the resources that they have, and what maybe you have planned to add to that roster or your toolbox.
Well, I appreciate that question very much. This is a topic that's near and dear to my heart. Two critical pieces that have been with me throughout my career are a real investment in student health and well-being, mental health in particular, and diversity, equity, inclusion. So we are doing everything we can. I am pleased to say that Carolina already has a pretty robust team in our counseling and psychological services, or CAPS, unit, as we like to call them. And one of the things that we have done this year, I hope folks took as a note, that we're very proud of, is that multicultural health program, which is again designed to sort of bring those two pieces together. So we've added 4 new individuals who are counselors to our team, as well as 2 student counselors, in effect, who are adding to the cadre of folks that we have who are both available to address the ongoing needs of students, which, in my experience, it has never been a case in which a university counseling center says, we're fine staff-wise, we don't need any more. It's just, it becomes every time you hire a new staff member in counseling, their schedule is immediately booked, and that has certainly been our case. So I'm particularly pleased to see that we have, I think, a robust team there, and one that really addresses the breadth of our students here at Carolina and is continuing to find new ways to do that. The other thing that we have engaged in, as you may imagine, is just a really active communication campaign, and that we constantly revisit with our students about, here are the resources available, here's how you can reach us. really promoting a virtual means, obviously for those students who are not here in the area, particularly to be able to access counselors. And I have to say at former institutions, granted not necessarily entirely during the pandemic, in my experience, there has been something of a resistance to pursue online counseling, but our students really appear to have embraced it, and we're getting very positive results about that so far. And continuing to make the most of things like group counseling and workshops, which again has, in my experience, has been sort of hit or miss on other campuses, that we seem to really be doing a nice job, and I think fulfilling a need on our campus. So I think you'll continue to see us promoting the resources we have, that we have services to address an array of counseling needs, whether or not what you want is really a support group and just a team of individuals who share a particular circumstance with you that you want to get together and treat as your sort of tribe every week to consult with on an active basis, or individual counseling, or something else. So I think we have a robust array of offerings, particularly for a college counseling area, and again, very proud and pleased to be able to offer this new multicultural health program, which centers on the needs of our Black, Indigenous, and students of color. I hope that answers your question.
Vice Chancellor Johnson, I want to commend sort of different. Joel Curran's team puts out the well every day that I get at 6 a.m. Sometimes, unfortunately, it wakes me up a little too early because my phone bings. But there was a recent, it may have been in the well, or it may have been Tar Heels Together article on Dr. Karen Bluth's work with self-compassion and mindfulness. She's a faculty member at UNC, and I know that she has studied the group approach of students and adolescents between 18 and 25 getting together and sharing their experiences so that they know they may not be alone in experiencing difficulties or whatever is the obstacles that may be put in their place. And I would commend her work to your office just as a recommendation.
Thank you for that. I appreciate it a great deal.
Mr. Chairman, I also have a quick question.
Okay, Reeves, thank you.
First of all, Dr. Johnson, I really appreciate the work that you and your team are doing right now, especially given, the extenuating circumstances and specifically the Relive Carolina program. I won't be here next semester, but I'll be really excited to hear about this new program and how students who kind of got their freshman or first year taken away from them kind of be able to really relive that Carolina experience. I'm also really excited about the multicultural health program, especially with the campus health increase that we passed last semester. It's also good to hear that telehealth is also being widely and pretty positively accepted by students. My question is more about just on-campus housing. So you mentioned 2,500 plus students living on campus right now. So does that include the 1,500 students that were living on campus because of hardships? And does that also include Beatty, Hill, and Granville? Because I know in previous conversations we were discussing a potential capacity of about 3,000 with single occupancy this semester. So I was just curious what that layout was, and if there just wasn't kind of a surplus in applications for housing for this semester and what that looked like.
Yeah, I appreciate it. And I apologize if I didn't make as fine a point about that during the presentation. So the numbers that I shared with you were main campus, which didn't include Beatty, Hill, and Granville. So in addition, based on some latest and greatest numbers that I have from Alan Blattner and Carolina Housing today, our projected spring occupancy in Beatty is just shy of 400, about 388. And in Granville, it looks like for spring 2021,
Matter. Our applications for this year were way up, and I'm sure that
TJ, we're good now.
All right, there's your cue. Thank you.
Okay, again, we're going to get an employee forum update from Chair Shana Hill. Shana, thank you.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, UNC family. Thank you for allowing me to share brief remarks from UNC staff. This is a privilege, and I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that privilege. As always, I struggled with what to share with this important body, as I do not want to squander this opportunity. I thought I would start by saying thank you. 2020 could have been a year of very little progress given all of the challenges, but that simply was not the case. Allow me to briefly recap some of our 2020 accomplishments. The Employee Forum realized a 4-year goal in advocating for and presenting the first staff award during the University Day celebration. The Rebecca Clark Staff Award for Moral Courage both honors the legacy of Rebecca Clark and a current staff member who displayed courage in tackling tough issues on our campus. We also convened the first ever Staff Advisory Committee to the Chancellor. This new body met this week for the second time, and all agree that this will be an excellent opportunity to share important staff issues directly with the Chancellor. The Campus and Community Advisory Committee met weekly during the fall semester, affording staff's involvement in critical spring semester planning as anxieties grew over increasing COVID numbers. And the Faculty Council invited the Employee Forum to join in a first ever joint meeting of the two bodies. This list is not exhaustive, as there were many other noteworthy accomplishments. But I think it bears pointing out that these incredibly positive new initiatives took place as the entire campus braced for and dealt with the largest global public health crisis of the century, along with a highly contested national election and an unthinkable resurgence of racism, anti-Semitism, and misogyny. This was a year of impossible choices as staff either figured out how to move their entire operations into their homes or how to deal with the unimaginable fear of showing up and suiting up in this new COVID reality. Everyone living through this crisis deserves to be recognized for their sacrifices and extreme commitment. Everyone, no exceptions, as this was indeed a heavy lift. So what now? 2021 is finally here, and we are faced with another extremely challenging semester. As vaccines become available, we will begin moving more people to classrooms, offices, and communal spaces. Staff will be asked to manage another major shift, both mentally and physically. We are not out of the woods yet, but as we can see, there is hope on the horizon. Even as some of us have lost loved ones to this horrible pandemic, even as recent incidents of racism, anti-Semitism, and misogyny, such as the one that attacked our campus Y, have attempted to fill our hearts with fear and hate. Again, I ask, what next? To me, the answer is obvious. Fight hate with love. As Robin Williams said, everyone you meet is fighting a battle you know nothing about. Be kind, always. As Martin Luther King taught us, fight darkness with light. There is much work to do, and we cannot be sidetracked by hate in any form. Not now, not ever. To Chancellor Guskowitz and the entire board, I will end these remarks with the way I started them. Thank you. Thank you for raising and taking the steps to raise the status of staff on this campus so that we can help fight darkness with light and spread the most effective combination of disinfectants to hate that there is. Those are fearless honesty, inclusion, diversity, and an unrelenting loving kindness. I thank you for your time.
Shana, thank you. Comments or questions? I want to thank you. That was very moving, and I appreciate it. And anytime you're down there, which we don't seem to be anymore, but when you see the staff and people around the campus that keep that campus going, just tell them thank you. I do. It's great because they are very much as much a part of this as we are, as anybody is. So thank you.
Chuck, this is Kevin. If I could just jump in, I just want to echo what you
Sure.
just said. I think the leadership that both Shana and Mimi have brought to our campus community has really been important. The work of that Campus and Community Advisory Committee, which Reeves, who I know we're going to hear from as well, has been a major part of, has really brought us together and moved us forward. So I love the comments and appreciate the partnership. So we're grateful for your leadership.
Thank you. Next, we're going to move to the Graduate Professional Student Federation update from Ryan Collins. Ryan, thank you for being here, and we look forward to hearing your remarks.
Thank you, Chair Duckett. And as always, it's good to be with you all. always a pleasure to be in the same space as Shayna and Mimi. I've learned a lot from them this year, and I think I've had the opportunity to interact with them more than my position normally would with the heads of the Employee Forum and the Staff Senate. So I want to express my appreciation for them and all the work that they've done. So I'm privileged to speak with you today on behalf of Carolina's nearly 11,000 graduate and professional students. Many of us are just a week into the new semester, but in my case, this is week 4. The law school started back on January 6th, so we are well into it. I do want to give a quick shout out to Trustee Artist Neal and say that I really wanted to take your media law class this semester, but I couldn't get it to work in my schedule, so I hope that you're having a good time with that. But of course, the reality is many of us never left. Our research has continued, lab work has continued, preparation for teaching in a new semester of undergraduate courses, has continued throughout winter break. Many of my constituents are preparing to defend dissertations later this year or to graduate in May and head into a fairly uncertain job market. But I think just as Shayna alluded to, there's reason to be optimistic. I'm very excited for a significant number of our folks in the Health Affairs Division who have already been getting vaccinated. And I'm hopeful that enough of the rest of us will get the vaccine soon and we'll maybe be able to have some normalcy back by the fall semester. Our elected representatives in the GPSF Senate have been more engaged in our work recently, and I think are starting to see the true value of the advocacy work that we do as an organization. So if you ever need to kill 3.5 hours, you can go back and watch the recording from our January meeting. We had a really lively debate, and so it I think is reflective of people's interest in the work that we're doing. And I also want to say that despite the strain incredible strain on our democratic institutions over the past several months, many of us feel like we are starting to turn a new chapter in our nation's history. We still have a lot of work to do to build a more equitable and just society for everyone. But with the talent and the dedication I see in my peers, I'm confident that we can get there. And so with that, I just want to share a couple more specific things that we've been working on. So TJ, if we can go to the next slide, please. So the first thing I want to highlight is that we had a really productive meeting with Provost Bluen, Dean Barbour, and Dean Rhodes, as well as Dr. Erin Malloy from the Center for Faculty Excellence, to talk about ways that we can improve the mentoring and supervisory relationship between graduate students, particularly PhD students, and their faculty advisors. These relationships are really critical to the experience that our constituents have during their academic programs and sets them up for success after graduation. And this is one of the areas that consistently is one of the top issues that our constituents raise in terms of what would improve their experience at Carolina. So I'm thankful to Provost Bluen and his staff for their support on this. Also have been working with Reeves and the Council of Student Body Presidents for the UNC system to do system level advocacy for ASG. I'm the only graduate student representative on that council, and a lot of times UNC is really carrying the lion's share of the advocacy for graduate student issues in the Association of Student Governments. So we have been very active recently in discussions, particularly around student fees. I had the chance to sit on a panel with the Board of Governors Budget and Finance Committee last week to talk about that process, and so I hope that we can continue to make that perspective heard. A couple things that I brought to you before. Our partnership with RHA is moving forward. We had our first meeting on Monday with a group of residents there that are excited to be part of our pioneering community council in that room. So we're excited to continue building community in our graduate housing program on campus. We're also continuing to work with our Future of the GPSF committee. We did a really comprehensive needs assessment over winter break. Had over 800 students respond to our general survey, and then 30 to a survey that went just to our current leaders within GPSF. Just want to mention some of the common concerns or areas of future advocacy that they want to focus us on. Mentorship opportunities, as I mentioned, including interdisciplinary mentorship, so having opportunities to connect across fields. Mental health, which was discussed earlier, career development, dental insurance, tuition and affordability, racial sensitivity training, and then of course continuing concerns over COVID-19. So we're going to be using this data in our strategic planning process. And I'll just do a quick program highlight. Our Director of Public Service, Lena Badrescu, is a neuroscience PhD student, and several volunteers have been putting together COVID care kits for students in the South Estes Elementary School District. including child size masks, which is something that often gets overlooked. And I know my mom, who subs part-time in the school system, sees a lot of that problem, is that a lot of kids don't have masks that fit their face properly, and that just creates some challenges there. Next slide, please, TJ. So again, just looking ahead, we're going to be continuing our COVID-19 support and advocacy, including around vaccines. I mentioned last time about our state legislative advocacy day we're continuing to work on. That is partially inspired by an equivalent federal program that we've participated in for a number of years through Student Advocates for Graduate Education, which is a coalition of 15 public research universities across the United States that once a year goes up to DC, or in this case, transmits, I guess, up to DC virtually the advocacy work that we're trying to do as an organization. Also, it's part of our Futures Committee process. We're looking at doing some restructuring, and our Senate has actually passed a referendum to change our name to Graduate and Professional Student Government. So this is kind of the last stage in our evolution as being a separate division of student government. So that goes to a referendum next month for the whole graduate student body to vote on. So next time I speak with you, I'll let you know how that goes. And at the next slide, I do just want to highlight one more big program that we have coming up. We do every year, which is our Graduate Research and Policy Expo. This is going to be hosted on April 8th. This is a chance for graduate students at UNC to show off the research that they have been doing over the course of their time at Carolina. Come before, we've had folks from, and usually members of the Board of Trustees have been there as well. So I do want to advertise this, and hope that members of this board will be able to zoom in and see some of the great research that our constituents are doing. So with that, again, I thank you all for the opportunity to speak with you, and I'm happy to take any questions you may have.
Ryan, thank you. Comments or questions for Ryan?
This is Teresa Artist now. Not so much for Ryan specifically, but I just did want to acknowledge now that I'm having the opportunity to experience UNC in a different way, teaching as an adjunct over the law school, and doing so starting this week in person. Grace and resilience. I have to commend to students that I've been teaching who were so thrilled to see each other in flesh and blood since last March, the ones in my class, and staff who helped someone like myself who was very clueless to a lot of the things related to onboarding, and also just faculty who are just doing all they can to maneuver in circumstances that COVID creates. So the spirit for Carolina of trying to achieve an excellence is definitely very high on the university campus, and I was just very pleased with what for me was a good onboarding experience, and just seeing how people were so helpful in the midst of COVID.
Thank you, Teresa. Any other comments or questions? Okay, Ryan, thank you for being here, and thank you for your update. At this time, we need to go into closed session for a couple of personnel items, and I'll get Teresa Artist Neal to take us into closed session and call roll, please.
Chairman, I move that the University Affairs Committee go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statutes, Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 1, to prevent the disclosure of privileged information under Section 126-22, and also pursuant to Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 5, and subsection A, subsection 6.
We have a motion to go into closed session. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. And all in favor, if Teresa will call the roll, please.
Okay. Artist Neal, yes. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Kobe?
Yes.
Mr. Cochran?
Yes.
Mr. Duckett?
Yes.
Ms. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Meekins?
Yes.
Mr. Mosley?
Yes.
And Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
Thank you. So it's unanimous, and we will at this time go into closed session, and I'm assuming, TJ, you need a minute to do this.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'm gonna run and get a drink of water. I'll be right back.
Thanks.
TJ, this is David, the captioner. You need me to leave the meeting?
Yes, sir. We'll call you back in just a few.
Thank you.
Actually, David, if you just want to go into the waiting room, we can bring you back in.
How do I do that?
I think I can do that.
Oh, okay.
Put in waiting room. See you in a few.
Okay, thanks.
All right, let's make sure we got everybody here.
Could you put me in the room also, TJ? This is Dean.
Dean, you can go ahead and head out.
Thank you.
Thanks.
TJ, are we back on time schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
We are. I'll give you the cue in just a second here.
Are you stopping the stream, Teach?
I'm live, Rob.
Okay.
Give us the cue.
Yep, will do. Okay, we're back on YouTube.
Okay. Thank you. That concludes our closed session for University Affairs. We're now back in open session. And if I don't have any further questions or comments from anyone, I would ask for a motion to close University Affairs meeting for January 2021.
So move.
Second. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to end University Affairs meeting for this month. And Teresa, if you would please call the roll.
Artist Neal, yes. Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Kobe?
Yes.
Mr. Cochran?
Yes.
Mr. Duckett?
Yes.
Mrs. Hopkins?
Yes.
Mr. Meekins?
Yes.
Mr. Mosley?
Yes.
Mr. Stevens?
Yes.
It's unanimous.
Okay, so we'll move to the next committee meeting. Thank you for all your help.
Teresa, may I ask a question? You haven't called Mr. Pryor for the last 2 or 3 votes. Is he now absent from the meeting?
No, he's not on that committee.
Okay.
I'm still here.
I heard that.
Good morning. TJ, should we begin external affairs? Good morning.
This is Emily. We're good to begin.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Emily. Good morning. Let's call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the UNC Board of Trustees External Relations Committee. I want to thank all of the members of this committee and all of the other trustees and staff who are in attendance today, and for all those who have worked hard to put this meeting together. I also want to welcome all others who are with us through the internet today. I believe it was University System Bill Friday, President Bill Friday, who said that the problems of the people are the problems the university must deal with. It seems to me, as I reflect on this past year, that our university has worked tirelessly on the problems faced by the people of our state, our nation, and our world. And I am so very grateful to all of our faculty and staff for their important work on these critical problems. Their life-saving and life-changing work will be forever remembered in the annals of our university's history. It seems that it is all too easy these days to focus on the things that divide us, but our mission as a university is too big for that. We must, for the sake of our fellow citizens, focus on solving the important problems that face our state and nation. It is the mission to which our university has been called from its very founding. We must not shrink from it. With respect for all, we must continue to work together for the common good. We must continue to tell the many stories to our very constituencies of the ways that our university is fulfilling these important missions. That being said, I'd like to now turn the meeting over to Joel Curran, the Vice Chancellor for Communications, to provide a communications update.
Good morning, Chair Davis. Thank you. And thank you for those words. Poignant and inspiring, much appreciated, and a great opening for my presentation. Thank you for that. And greetings to the members of the External Affairs Committee and all trustees. Thank you. I have the pleasure of bringing you today an overview of a really core function that we have at University Communications, and that's our media relations team. I've spent the past year bringing you into the different phases of how we go about our jobs at University Communications, including internal communications, community relations, the content team, and all of them are very important. They're not always interchangeable, although they do overlap in some respects in how we respond to issues and how we help to promote opportunities. But the core group, and really at our heart, is the media relations team, because historically that really is the soul, the DNA, if you will, of what we do in my field, and that is helping to ensure that our publics are informed on the activities and all of our actions at the university. And what we find is, more often than not, one of the most important conduits for helping to keep the public informed is through the media. And of course, today we benefit from being our own publishers. We have our own website. We have our own different ways and platforms, et cetera, of how we communicate with our various constituencies. But of course, democracy needs a free press, and a free press really relies on organizations like ours to help keep them informed accurately and timely. And that's a heavy lift at a large place like UNC-Chapel Hill. I don't have to tell you how broad and diverse we are as an operation. And I can't impress upon you enough today, especially how vital a role our media relations team plays in keeping the public informed and doing so with the greatest and highest degree of professionalism and integrity. So today I want to walk you through what that looks like. And Emily, if you'll advance the slides. I don't think I have to tell you that we live in a 24/7 news cycle. And I show you this to illustrate print news like the New York Times will run video packages. They have social media platforms. Their reporters are reporting on news and opining on events in real time on their Twitter feeds and through other social media platforms. And then on a local level, we'll have a content driver like our local television stations who also provide print content, and they will live stream events. This may be live streamed today. And we have to manage those types of flows of information from various outlets to ensure that it is accurate and to ensure that those reporters have the most up-to-date information. And perhaps more importantly, and this is really the nuanced part of the job, to help them understand the context and the depth of what we are trying to explain and what we're doing. And that takes a lot of time. And more importantly, perhaps today than ever, it's also helping to understand the evolving definition of a journalist. Many people work for mainstream media and these various platforms, and other people assume the role of a journalist and maybe what has heretofore been not considered to be a journalistic organization. So we have to really sort through those in real time as well. Emily? A little bit of history. Our beloved Carolina Alumni Review chronicled the University Communications Department, which was then known as University Relations, back in 1970. And at that time, they were explaining how important the function was, largely as a publicity arm of the university. And in that time, it was very important. We had 3 television stations we might be working with locally. 1 newspaper, no social media, and the national news was equally limited, no cable news. But it was still very important to ensure that our publics were informed. And I thought this was a great piece that reflected the power of public relations at that time. Also, just for a point of history, in another year, we will be celebrating our 100th anniversary as a department, which was really founded on media relations, initially by Bill Madry, who, best as I can tell, was the university's sole public relations practitioner for athletics and everything at this university. And then eventually a man named Pete Ivey, who was legendary university communications. But both of them really came from the field of press agentry, as it was known. And of course, we've evolved as social media and other platforms have grown, and the need to be monitoring the news medias and these various platforms has exponentially grown. And it requires a team to do that. And Emily? So this group is the core of what we do from a media relations perspective. It's a big part of the university communications team. And as I said earlier, it's a 24/7 news operation. This team and others in support of them are generally working around the clock or on call. The news cycle never ends. And more often than not, we are working throughout the business day and into the evening, and then starting over in the early morning, monitoring the news, ensuring that it is accurate. Many journalists oftentimes are asking us for follow-up. It requires a great deal of depth and understanding. You don't just acquire this. It's not something you just hand off to somebody. These are in many respects experts in this field. They have a great deal of depth and understanding the various aspects of the university. Some of them specialize in different functions or fields, and others have a broad portfolio that they manage. Joanne Peters-Denny manages the team. I know you've met Joanne before. Leslie Minton is the number 2. And then Kate, Pace, Carly, Jenny, Chantel, Betsy all play really important and distinct roles in how we respond and manage all of these responsibilities in real time. And by the way, since I've been here and now on my 8th year, you think you've seen it all, and then something new comes your way. And the front line is normally somewhere in our media relations team, and they do work very closely with our social media team and our content team and internal communications. We all work very closely together, but this group is responsible for responding and reaching out to the media. And what I want to talk to you about today is, I think, an important lesson in commitment and perseverance. Since last August, actually, I'm sorry, going back to almost a year ago, we've been managing the news flow in and around the pandemic, which has really had many different legs to it with how we respond to it. Of course, there's the operational aspect of how we're managing the flow of information around campus operations. There is the research aspect to what we're doing, the important research here around the COVID-19 research. And then there's overarching needs that the university has that have nothing to do with COVID-19. And you would call that the ongoing business, the research, the important aspects of this university that otherwise might go untold if we couldn't somehow find a way to both respond to the overwhelming needs of COVID-19 and the news flow, as well as keeping our eye on the ball of all the other work that's going on here that needs to be continue to have a spotlight shined on it. And that's really what I want to tell you about today. Emily? So since last August and through this week, the media relations team has responded to roughly 878 inquiries. I'm going to give you some context in a little while, but just to break it down for you, this is largely COVID-19 operations, the daily flow of questions that come in about police actions off campus, on campus, and we have a specialist who helps our police team, Chief Perry, with that. More recently, something like the DEA investigation, Title IX records, the admissions lawsuit. These all require a great deal of depth and experience and expertise so that they can quickly and accurately facilitate questions coming into them from the media. Emily? Specific to that are the 767 media inquiries related to COVID-19 operations. And I would say to you, in any other aspect of our world, that would be enough to take up our team's full-time focus. because frankly, it never stops. We have a very robust coverage from the Daily Tar Heel. This is the world that they report on. We have a very engaged local media. And of course, we've garnered a lot of national attention. We're a large public university. They like to know what we're doing. And so we get a lot of questions related to that. As we go, many respects, we are moving with the trends in the nation, but sometimes we're out in front of those, and that requires even more attention, if you would, Emily. But what's important to note is this team has maintained a focus on what we would say are the proactive outreaches to the media. So rather than just waiting to respond to the media inquiries, which come at us in a heavy flow all day, night, and into the next day, the team has continued to stay focused on identifying these positive news opportunities that are both operational, they're new university initiatives, identifying faculty experts, and a range of topics that are still happening in the nation and the world, as well as research studies. Many of them don't have anything to do with COVID-19, but they still are important and especially integral to the mission of the university. And I'm really proud that this team has found a way to both handle the COVID-19 flow as well as maintaining a focus on that proactive media outreach. Emily? So to give you some context, the workload over the past 9 or so months has increased by 34% on prior year. Let me repeat that, 34%. And despite all of that, we've managed to maintain, not just maintain focus on the proactive, but we've actually increased the proactive pitches by 4%. And I think what's important here is the increased placements in major national publications are up 233%. So the yield has gone up and the quality, if you will, of placements has increased tremendously during that time. So they always say never waste a crisis, and this team has taken that opportunity and really made something special out of that from a university communication standpoint. Go ahead, Emily, thank you. Just to give you an idea what goes into this, as you might imagine, every contact with a reporter is unique. Sometimes it's a routine, sometimes it's something a little more nuanced, but a lot of this also involves relationship building with journalists, building trust, and that happens despite what you may think. Sometimes when you read stories, we actually work very closely with journalists. We consider them to be colleagues, associates, and enjoy the interactions. We also find that journalists are very interested in making sure that they receive accurate information, have access to sources. We do all of that, and that's very important. We are deep in university initiatives. We have to monitor what is being said in our public meetings so that we're able to help journalists and help our experts and campus leadership respond, provide additional information when needed. A lot of times that involves preparation going into the meeting with those campus leaders, and a lot of times that helps them come out of those meetings, as we will today with the Chancellor and Chair Stevens with addressing the media after today's meeting. We do a lot of writing. We write outreach to journalists to help them understand there's an opportunity they may be interested in. We prepare our campus experts, including our faculty, who are going to be very engaged with the media, to help them be more confident and comfortable speaking to journalists. And that's important because we want them to be able to focus on the subject matter that they have expertise in without worrying about that camera that's in front of them and the lights that are shining and the reporter who's on the other end of a phone line or a Zoom these days. And so that gives them an additional level of comfort that our expertise can help them with. A lot of times when we're back on campus, we are preparing for logistics, big public meetings, smaller venues. This meeting, if we were in a live venue today, we would have had to staff and help journalists be able to set up, be prepared, and have access to the campus leaders so they can do their story. And then fact checking, I can't impress upon you enough how important that is. Again, we deal in oftentimes very complex science, topics that are not easy to ascertain additional information, and we help journalists gather more information so that they too can provide the most accurate information. Emily? So to give you a sense of what that can look like sometimes, back at the start of the fall semester, we had the Washington Post with us for about 7 or 8 days. And a journalist was allowed to have access with not just campus leadership, but all aspects of our campus operations. And we did that knowing that this was a new experience for us. And we thought we had prepared. And a journalist presents us with an opportunity. They can come down and cover these things without our help. But they also ask for our help, and we believe that that's in our best interest as well as theirs to ensure that they have best access to the best sources we can provide so that they understand what it is that we're doing and what's happening. And I have to say that this journalist in particular gave us a fair and balanced story, and in subsequent to that was able to help put additional context around the different changes that we made operationally, because he understood what we were doing here. And I think that was very important. And that required the full-time devotion and commitment from 2 or 3 media specialists who were helping to set up the logistics, who tag teamed their way through that with me. Emily? But these are sometimes stories that you don't necessarily see because they're in topics that you may not notice right away as having a Carolina spin to it, a Carolina expertise. And these are experts from our faculty and our labs and our classrooms who are connected with these journalists, who are looking for experts in the field. And these change every day. So our media relations team are watching the news and working with the dedicated campus communications professionals who work in our schools, departments, and units around campus, who are integral to what we do to help provide the connection between those experts and those journalists. And I can't thank our campus partners enough for their willingness to help us often at odd times and hours. Additional coverage, giving you more sense of the type of science that we're working in and the expertise. And again, Emily. Stories that I'm sure that don't always pop up on your radar, some that might. Emily, and this just gives you a sense of the media outlets. And to be clear, we work with all media outlets. You know, it ranges from student-driven publications that are both local and national, all the way to global news outlets that some of whom have never been to Chapel Hill, and many others who have higher education reporters and understand this field very well, and many others, and I say the vast majority, who don't cover higher education, may not cover that topic that often, if at all, and need additional information to help understand that story. And that is a win both for their readers and the public and for UNC and for our experts here on campus. So that concludes my presentation, and I appreciate your time and attention, and I'm open to any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chancellor. Are there any questions for Vice Chancellor Curran?
Chair Davis, this is Haywood Cochran. I have one for Joel.
Yes, please go right ahead, Chairman.
Joel, given the growth in the need for public relations, the number of outlets that we need to satisfy, but what do you see for the next 5 years in terms of where we need to be, staffing-wise, so that we don't miss things that are very important to the institution?
Thank you, Haywood. Trustee Cochran, that's a great question, and I appreciate it. I'll try to be as succinct as possible. I think, you know, I manage a very broad portfolio, from, you know, the lawyers who work in the Office of Public Records to the creatives in UNC Creative to some of our campus tour guides that work out of our virtual and real visitor center. Broad group. They shoot pictures, they take videos, you know, they work across different fields of expertise. I can tell you that media relations, as we know it, intersects with many different things that we do. You know, on a given day, we do have this core media relations team. They are backed up by individuals across my team who will tag team and be on duty and manage the media relations inbox through weekends and holidays, and they are committed and they're very passionate to what they do. I think what's important to note is that the media relations field as we know it, while it has changed and while traditional media continues to evolve and find new ways to be profitable and operate as important as they are to the democracy, find that good financial model, it's not going to change. It will just evolve into how they share the news with their publics, and they will still need to have more information from us. So we will always be challenged to manage that flow. We can always use more, but I think right now, especially with our budget, constraints and looking over the horizon at the needs of the university, I mean, we will continue to really maximize the team that we have, find new ways to leverage additional resources, and find ways to help ensure that as the media evolve and how they report, we will evolve and how we are able to help them get their news out to the public.
Thank you,
Joel.
Very good question, Trustee Cochran. Any other questions for Vice Chancellor Curran?
Yeah, Chairman Davis, this is John Pryor. I just wanted to ask Joel, in the nature of public information requests, what is the volume of stuff that would rise to the level of serious things that we ought to be apprised of versus what sort of routine and, in and out every day? Just kind of curious though.
Trustee Pryor, that's a great question. I can assure you that, when we are working on an issue, and I'll just say that's in a broad definition. Generally speaking, you will probably have been briefed on that at the very least by Vice Chancellor Marshall, Vice Chancellor Manganey, the Chancellor or the Provost, or any number of others. So it's unlikely that we would be jumping into a topic that is not being co-managed by one of my partners in the administration. I think what gets a little tricky, and I try to be as forthcoming as I can when we see a story coming that we think you would be interested in, that might be something that you want to be aware of before it comes out. We definitely would like to make you aware of that. More often than not, we won't know that until we see that story ready to break. And so sometimes that is, 24 hours notice. And other times, we might be tracking a story that is unfolding over weeks or months. And what I've tried to do is incorporate that heads up into one of my other associates in the administration as they give you their briefings to let you know there's certainly going to be media interest in that. So that's generally how I have marshaled that flow with our trustees.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chancellor. And thank you, Trustee Pryor, for that question. Any other questions for Vice Chancellor Curran?
Mr. Chairman, this is David Bullock. Joel, I know you guys are working hard. Just like to ask you about the coordination of comments from faculty through your office and the notification that your office does or does not get when faculty are commenting or giving expert information to media outlets. What does that flow look like?
Yeah, thank you, Trustee Bullock. I can tell you that, obviously we appreciate it when we have an opportunity to work with that faculty member as they prepare for an interview. So in that case, oftentimes, we get a chance to work with them and know generally what the topic is and what they would like to say. And we try to help them, understand how to best deliver that. I will also say, as you likely know, and for everybody's edification, we really don't have any control over what faculty say and do, and they are free to speak as they please. And so oftentimes, in their field of expertise, they may be reached directly by a reporter, and they are free to comment to that reporter. Sometimes they'll let us know that they gave that interview. Sometimes they won't, and we read about it like everybody else. That happens a lot, and it happens, especially in areas where they have a relationship with a reporter in a specific field. And other times, it could be that a faculty member, simply, will pick up the phone, will talk to that reporter, and speak to that topic, and we may or may not know about it until we read it. So it really comes and goes in different ways, and we simply don't know all of the faculty interactions with reporters, and those that we do, we appreciate it, and other times it just simply isn't something we know about.
Thanks.
Vice Chancellor, thank you for that question, Trustee Bullock. Any other questions for Vice Chancellor Curran? Seeing none, Mr. Vice Chancellor, we thank you very much to you and your team for all of the important work that you are doing to tell the stories of the many ways that our university is making our state and our nation and our world even better. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee.
Now I would like to turn to Vice Chancellor Clayton Summers for a public affairs update. Mr. Vice Chancellor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning to you and all the trustees and Chancellor Guskowitz and the rest of the Tar Heel family. We're always very grateful to be in front of you and present. So thank you for your time this morning. We'll have a brief update today. As you all are aware, both Congress and the General Assembly have both just started their new sessions, so not a lot of substance to report, but we'll get to that in the March meeting. At the state level, as you're aware, the General Assembly came back about 2 weeks ago for their organizational session. They elected their leadership, and they recessed for a couple of weeks to get their committees organized and timing of how the committees meet and everything to get moving during the session. Both Speaker Moore and Senator Berger were both reelected to their leadership positions, and then Senator Dan Blue was selected by his Senate caucus to be the Democratic leader, and then Robert Reeves, who was also a Carolina graduate, was selected as the House Democratic leader. So we look forward to working with the four of them in both their caucuses this session. As far as the previous General Assembly session, first, I think you'll see them immediately address some COVID issues, and then, of course, they will turn to developing a state budget. As you all are aware, there's been a stalemate the last couple of years due to the inability of the executive and legislative branches to agree on a budget. So the result is almost, it is an automatic continuing resolution based on prior year's funding. So the good news is there is a significant amount of money there on the bottom line. And we do think there is some reason for optimism this year. 2020 was obviously a very contentious election cycle. And now the dust is settling, we're seeing some positive overtures from both the legislative and executive branch about trying to find some common ground to move forward. So I think we will see a budget agreement this year. We're optimistic about that. We'll keep you posted, but there are reasons for optimism at the state level that we might get some progress done this year. The Board of Governors has set their legislative agenda. We've talked about it before. Their primary objectives are to get full funding for enrollment growth and building reserves, also advocating strongly for faculty and staff increases, salary increases, which we've not had the last few years, and then also to fully fund the NC Promise program. We'll keep you posted as the session develops. In March, we'll have a pretty good substantive update, and then in June, I think we'll have a really substantive update. As you know, most of the work gets done towards the middle and end of the session. At the federal level, again, Congress just starting on its new session. Back in December, since our last meeting, we did see Congress pass some additional COVID relief. They appropriated $82 billion to support education. $20 billion of that was for higher education. Our UNC system received about $279 million, and at the campus level here, about $25 million of that would come to campus. Governors across the country also received funds. Governor Cooper received about $127 million for his discretion to use. We don't know what his priorities will be, although we always know Governor Cooper is a very strong supporter of not just higher education, but education in general. Congress also did pass a $1.4 trillion FY21 spending package that will run through September of 21. So at least in the short term there, we don't have to worry about government shutdowns, although now moving forward, they will still turn their attention to the president will have his what's called the skinny budget, make his budget request in the next month or so. So we'll see what President Biden's priorities are. We did see some increases, I should note, in the federal budget with NIH and NSF, both got 3% and 2.5% increases. That's significant to us because those agencies distribute a significant amount of the federal funding for research. So we were glad to see that in the bill. Again, we'll keep watching to see what happens with President Biden and watch to him put his stamp on not just his administration, but his congressional priorities. We'll be monitoring that at the federal level and the state level and keep you posted. In the meantime, I would be happy to take any questions, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chancellor. Are there any questions for Vice Chancellor Summers? If there are no others, I do have one quick question, if I might, Mr. Vice Chancellor.
Yes, sir.
Any sense, you mentioned the priorities of the Board of Governors and their advocacy at the General Assembly. Any sense that there might be any advocacy around additional funds for some of the significant deferred maintenance we have on campus?
That is thank you for that question, Mr. Chairman. Yes, there is a very significant amount of attention being paid to R&R. The Board of Governors is well aware of the R&R needs, not just on our campus, but across the system. So you will see a lot of advocacy on behalf of that, yes.
Thank you very much for all you're doing to point that out as a priority with them and with the General Assembly. And thanks to you and your team for all that you're doing to advocate both at the General Assembly, but also in Congress and among the executive branch in our nation, telling our stories of the ways that we are fulfilling the important missions that have been given to us is so important, and you and your team do a great job of it. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir. If there are no other questions for Vice Chancellor Summers, I would like to now call upon Trustee Artis Neal for a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that the External Relations Committee go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute, Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 1, to prevent the disclosure of privileged information under Section 126-22, and also pursuant to Section 143-318.11, subsection A, subsection 2.
Thank you very much. You have heard the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Trustee Cochran. I'll now call upon Trustee Artis Neal for a roll call vote of the committee.
Artis Neal, yes. Mr. Bullock.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.
Yes.
Mr. Hopkins. I mean, Ms. Hopkins. Ms. Hopkins. Mr. McCullen.
Yes.
Mr. Meekins.
Yes.
Mr. Mosley.
Yes.
Mr. Pryor.
Yes.
Mr. Stevens.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, just a clarification, sir. I think that I think I heard Mr. Bullock make a second there since Mr. Bullock's on the committee. Just to clarify.
Yes, it was Trustee Bullock. Thank you very much, Trustee Bullock. And so please let the records note that Trustee Bullock made the second, that the roll call vote was unanimous. And we will now move into closed session. After closed session, we will return for a brief time. And I would like to ask TJ if he would now move us into closed session.
Okay, everyone, stand by. I'll let you know when we're in closed.
Thank you, Emily.
The fact that you were not called for a vote the first couple of times. I thought you'd left us.
We're going to get you a television one day and then get you a computer too. You just wait.
I've got a great TV.
We are up on YouTube.
All right. We are back live and want to thank everyone again for all the committee members for attending, the other trustees and staff, and all those who have attended with us virtually around the state and around the country and world. It's been a pleasure for us to have this committee meeting today. With no further business, would like to entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I make that motion, Gene?
Unfortunately.
No.
But
I'll make that motion.
Motion to adjourn.
With Haywood's approval.
Trustee Bullock, seconded by Trustee Pryor.
Mr. Chairman, right before you call the vote, just a quick announcement. This ends our committee work exactly on time, Haywood, by the way. We will take a break and the full board will reconvene at 1 o'clock on a different Zoom call. So you need to end this Zoom call, and TJ has sent you instructions for the full board call at 1 o'clock. So we'll see everybody back at 1 o'clock after lunch.
Thank you.
And Stevens, are you going to be sending us lunch to these diverse boards?
You can count on it.
Well, again, I want to thank everyone. There was a motion to adjourn and it was properly seconded and is now before the committee. I would ask the Secretary, Artis Neal, to please call the roll.
Artis Neal, yes. Mr. Bullock,
Yes.
Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Mrs.